Hello, it's Todd with ConcretePumping.com. I'm here with Ed Lothamer, and I wanted to say hi and welcome, Ed, and appreciate you willing to do this interview with us.
Well, I'm really glad to do it.
Great. I wanted to just kind of get some of your history and background and kind of get a feel for where you were in the past and where you are now and how you see the future of our industry, the concrete pumping industry. And, everybody that I know of, anybody that I've ever talked to has always held you in high regard and had a lot of respect for you, and that's the reason the reason I'm doing this interview. So again, I really appreciate it. Now I wanted to start with what'd your parents do?
Well, my father was a real estate agent, and my mother was a commercial artist, and I was an only child. My mother had cancer right after I was born, and I went to public school in Detroit, Michigan, and I went to college in Michigan State. I was lucky enough to play football there, and then I was drafted by the Chiefs, and I came to Kansas City in 1964. My first year here, I taught school because I had a degree in education. My second year, I couldn't get on with any schools, so I went and got a job with a concrete company called Botsford Ready Mix, and I was with them from 1965 to roughly 72. In 1971, I made an association with a guy named Bob Simpson, and Bob had two Whiteman concrete pumps, and I was on a job with him one day, and he asked me if I'd help him market them, and so basically I started a little side company with my wife as the dispatcher, and there were three pumping companies in Kansas City at that time. There was Simpson O'Malley, and there was a guy named Bill Ballou, and there was a guy named Frank Sambo, and I got so good at marketing the equipment that we were dispatching them all out of my house, and my wife was a central dispatcher. So, in about 2 years into that, in 1973, Frank Sambo came to me and asked me if I'd be interested in coming over to his company and being a shareholder and helping him grow his business. So I went to work for Frank in 73, and we started with, I believe, 4 pumps, and we ended up with 8. And then in 1977, I had an opportunity. A gentleman approached me about starting my own company, and so in 1977, we started Concrete Placement Incorporated. We started with the 2 Whitemans that Simpson O'Malley had. We bought them out, and then we bought a swing concrete pump from Richard O'Brien out in Denver, Colorado, and we drove it back to Kansas City, and we started with 3 units, and then in 1978, my original partner died on a tennis court playing tennis one night. He was 35 years old, so I had to take on another partner. I took on a gentleman named Bob Douglas. We were really, really good friends, and so from 1978 to 1982, we grew the company, and in 1982 we had approximately, I'm going to say, 20 concrete pumps between Kansas City, Oklahoma City, Tulsa, and Florida. And in 1982, Bob had some business reversals, and he committed suicide. So I guess the good news is you don't want to be a partner with Ed Lothamer. But anyway, so that was basically it. And then from after he passed away, we bought several more pumps. After the fact, we kept growing. We kept going to new cities. We moved into the Carolinas. We moved into southern Missouri. We moved into Arizona. And we were still in Florida. We expanded in Florida, and so we just kind of kept growing until 1999. In 1999, we had 197 machines, and we were in, I believe, 9 different cities, and we were approached by, I believe, the second or third time by Brunage & Bone, and we made the decision at the time to sell the company in 1999 to Brunage & Bone, and then I went to work for them for 5 years per the employment agreement, and then after that I became a distributor for Swing America. So that's my history in brief.
So it sounds like you've been involved with Swing for quite a long time then. Have you bought pretty much only Swings up until your first 2 pumps, or besides those first 2 pumps?
We became a Swing dealer in 1978. We bought our first Swing, like I said, from Richard O'Brien, and then after that we bought exclusively Swing because at the time we felt like it was the best pump in the United States of America. Putzmeister was here. I don't know if they came at the same time, but we demoed a C-valve Putzmeister, but we were more familiar and liked the Schwing, so we stayed with the Schwing product line. And as I said, in '78 we became a dealer. So we got through the early '80s when we had the depression, sort of like we're having now, only not quite as bad, and we grew, and we were selling and buying Schwings at that time. I think we were number one dealer for Schwing 4 out of about 6 or 7 years, and so the product line and our company became kind of blended together, and that's how we grew. And of course, in Brundage, when we got with Brundage, they were mostly Schwing pumps as well, and they then have spun off and got into some Putzmeisters. But the thing is now, I think everybody, compared to what it was, I mean, when I first started, you spent more time going out on job sites and trying to tell superintendents, we can pump this, and they'd laugh at you, because they'd had a bad experience with a pump at some point in time earlier, and you had to have a sweetheart mix. You had to make sure that the sand content was good, and that they had plenty of cement in it, and you had to water it up a little bit. And so, it was very, very difficult in the early years to convince people to use a concrete pump. But then, once we started banging away at them, I mean, once you could get a guy to pump concrete, then his people would kind of almost revolt if they had to go back to some other method, because pumping became the easiest and most efficient method, and they all pretty much figured that out after the get-go. And then the improvement of the equipment. I mean, in the early days, a lot of the pumps wouldn't pump a lot of the mixes, and now, I mean, it's pretty difficult to find a mix that a concrete pump won't pump.
Right. You got any good old pump stories for us?
Yeah, you asked me earlier, well, not in this interview, but you mentioned to me that you want to know about some of the pours that we were involved in that I really thought were significant. We were fortunate enough to do the Dames Point Bridge caissons. We went down on a Wednesday. We got into Jacksonville, and we used 4 pumps on an island being fed by barges, and we pumped 12,000 yards one Saturday, and then we stayed over, and then the following Saturday we pumped 17,000, almost 18,000 yards, and we did that with 3 pumps. We were averaging 400 yards an hour, and we did that for 48 or 50 some hours, 60 hours, and those were very significant pours for us at that time. It was probably the biggest pour we'd ever done. I think it was maybe one of the largest pours in the U.S. So we were really happy about that, and it was great to be able to do it with 3 pumps, because we got a lot of press, and I think people realized, well, if they can do this kind of volume with concrete pumps, certainly they've come a long way, and they must be pretty dependable. So that was great. I mean, as far as stories about the industry, I mean, there's just so many of them. I mean, it's just hard to go back and say, well, what stands out in your mind? I mean, I remember this when we first started in business. We had a pour up in St. Joseph on a sewage treatment plant, and my operator that was running the pump, it was the first time he'd ran the Schwing, and he was used to pumping in a higher gear. So he had the pump in the wrong gear, and the guy called me up, and he said, he was yelling and screaming and telling me he had guys standing all over the job, and that he couldn't get the concrete out the end of the boom, and ranting and raving. So I got in my car and I drove up there. It was about an hour and a half drive. By the time I got there, well, I realized he was in the wrong gear, so I just put the pump in a higher gear, and it took off, and it was pumping fine, and then from that point on, this guy thought I was a genius with concrete pumps, So, I mean, and that's kind of the way it was. I mean, nobody really understood them in the beginning, and I think, most of the guys who were in the industry in the beginning knew how to work on them. I certainly did, and they knew how to run them, and I certainly did, and I think, that was invaluable, because, when you got out of the job, I mean, first of all, it was difficult to convince them to use a concrete pump, and second of all, if you had a problem, I mean, you could pump for a guy 50 straight times and never have a problem, and then if you had one problem on the 51st pour, that's the only one he's ever going to remember. You can see the guy 15 years from now, and he'll remember that 51st pour when he lost 30 yards of concrete and they had 40 guys standing on the deck, so
yeah,
that's kind of the way it was.
Were there any industry icons back in the day that you went to that you could call that helped you out? Or
there's no question about it. I mean, Richard O'Brien was was what I would consider the god of concrete pumping at that time. I mean, he was the only guy I knew of that had a couple pumps in his garage. He just had them there. I guess they were either for sale or, he just didn't need them. He just bought them for whatever the reason. And, I went out there when I saw his operation, I was dumbfounded. I mean, it was an eye-opener for me. I mean, he was the closest guy to us being in Colorado, us being in Kansas City. But, I mean, if there was an icon at that time, I would say, and I would have to say that Richard O'Brien has probably been involved with starting more pumping companies than just about anybody in the United States of America. I mean, there's, if you think about it, Dale Bone worked for him, Alan Bone worked for him, and there's just so many more people that went through his organization, and I would say that probably 70% of the United States still uses his job ticket that he put together with the help of his attorneys, and everybody kind of plagiarized that. So if there was an icon, I would say he was the one.
All right. Were you involved at all in the ACPA getting started?
I'm sorry?
Were you involved in the ACPA getting it started, or?
No, actually, I wasn't. I didn't. I think my first ACPA meeting, I'm going to say, was 1973. I'm not positive of that. It was in. I remember it was in New Orleans. I think there had been two before that, one in California and one somewhere else, maybe Washington D.C. So my first involvement was 1973, and then I really didn't get involved until probably the late 70s. When I first got involved with the ACPA, Roger Ferris approached me and said, "Ed, we would really like you to get involved with the ACPA. We'd really like you to get your feet wet here and see if we can't get your input in some of the areas, and we would like you to be involved." So I got involved, and then I became the president. I was a president for 4 years, and I was honored to be that. And I've been a board member for several years, and it's a great organization. It's made tremendous strides. We went through some turmoils. When I was the president, we were broke, and so I had to appeal to all the board members to put up $1,000 apiece just to keep the doors open, and we did, and we survived, and I think now the organization is really well financed, and I think it's doing a lot of really great things. This legislation thing is absolutely vital, and I hope they get it done, and all the safety stuff that they do, and all the certification that they do. I mean, these are things that everybody just takes for granted. But I mean, if you ever go to court, then a lot of this stuff you're going to be glad it's in place. Right.
How do you see our industry right now in today's market? Is it going to be a growing industry for us as far as contractors actually realizing they need a pump, or do you think they pretty much got the message already? How's your feelings on that?
Todd, I hate to say this to you. As a matter of fact, I'm in the middle of preparing some literature on this very subject, and it is my opinion in gathering all this together, I think we have come to the conclusion that the United States has an abundance of concrete pumps for the business that we now have that's available. I mean, because of some of the shifts in the industry and some of the shifts in where pumping is done, I believe that there are an abundance of concrete pumps in our country to handle the amount of concrete that we're producing. So that being said, and that sounds like doom and gloom. It's really not. What it means is that we are a mature industry now, and that we need to get people involved in our industry that understand that we're a mature industry, and we need to start charging enough money to make money pumping concrete. I mean, I was guilty of not doing it. Everybody's been guilty of not doing it. You figure if the other guy can do it, you can do it cheaper. But we need to mature as an industry, and we need to come up with a business plan that instead of relying on the equipment to be where our equity source is, we need to make the pumping business itself a profit center, because if we don't, we're not going to survive. I mean, it's to the point where there's just way too much equipment for the business that's at hand. So I mean, you have to get your per dollar yield up in order to justify the equipment that you have and to be able to buy new equipment. I mean, we can't continue to roll around at 1981 prices in the year 2008 or 2009. We're going to have to get the pricing up, and it's going to be a shock for the industry and a shock for the people that are using concrete pumps, but it's absolutely essential, because if we don't do it, I think we're going to be, within another 5 years, we're going to be in real trouble, especially the guys that are trying to do this on their own and the up-and-coming people.
Do you think that's going to happen by companies that aren't making money going out of business, and the ones that have money just holding out, or do you think it's going to be through education and cooperation, or how do you see this happening?
Well, it has to be through education. And it has to be by the type of people that are coming into the industry. You know, we all were what I would call mom and pop shops. We started. You know, my wife was a dispatcher for me for 12 years, and I mean, it was our life work, and, you know, and a lot of our relatives worked for us, and so, you know, the industry is going to have to grow, and it's going to have to mature, and we're going to have to become businesses that are businesses. I mean, you know, and so there probably will be some merging. There will probably be some major corporations come out of this that may buy into the pumping industry. But whatever it is, you know, we're going to have to make money, because, you know, if you go to a bank today and you have a statement where you're breaking even, or maybe you're losing some money, and you want to buy a concrete pump, it's going to be a difficult proposition. They're going to want a good chunk of money down. They're going to want short terms. They're going to want high interest. You know, but if you go to the bank and you show some profit, let's say you make $500,000 or $1 million a year, that's going to loosen things up. I mean, and the whole key to this is being able to get the equipment you need. I mean, obviously, right now nobody's buying anything, but, you know, we're still using the equipment, and 2 or 3 years from now, there's going to be a big, big need for new replacement equipment. I mean, they're going to have places they're going to buy new equipment. They're going to have places to put their old equipment, and the only way we're going to have that in place is if there is a notion across the United States, or a feeling that, you know, this is a good industry and you can make money doing this. And I mean, if people realize that, then they won't mind taking your used equipment and paying a good dollar for it and starting their own businesses. I mean, but if nobody's making any money and there's a glut of pumps sitting around waiting for people to buy them, then nobody's going to buy them.
Right. Right. Well, I hear Richard O'Brien talking about this quite a bit, and he's actually, over the years, done a lot of work to try to show people what it costs to actually pump concrete. But from what I see from the actual pump companies, there's a lot of them that they just want to get the job. They just want to keep their guys busy. They just want to, you know, keep the volume up. And I haven't seen a trend moving towards making money yet. Do you think that's something? Is that an accurate assessment, or do you think that's changing?
Well, you know, I mean, and by the way, I've talked to Richard on many, many occasions about the same subject. And you know, what it's going to take is that, you know, because of, and sometimes, you know, we're going to get there whether we want to get there or not, because what's going to happen to our economy and what's going to happen to our availability of credit and all these other things, and the way we can get into the business and how we're going to get into the business. You're not going to have guys getting into the business with $10,000 or $15,000 they borrowed from their uncle, and they're going to start in the pumping business, and it's going to flourish. So, you know, you're going to have people that have a pretty good stake in their business, and they're going to have reliability and credibility with the banks, and you know what I mean. So the day of a guy getting a concrete pump and being in business and then flourishing, you know, because he works hard and he works out of a trailer, he works out of his house, his wife dispatches and all that, it could still happen. But I don't think it's going to be nearly as prevalent as it has been in the past, because I think everybody's going to be limited by the money that they can get to finance their industries and their businesses. And believe me, it's going to get tighter and tighter and tighter, because, you know, our industry was young enough and our equipment was new enough that nobody in the financial industry understood basically what they were financing. They were taking the individual, and they were looking at his potential, and they were saying, well, okay, you know, we'll take a chance and we'll dance. That's not going to happen anymore. They all know now. They've got records. They've got, you know, 100, 200 concrete pumps have been auctioned off, and they can see what they bring at an auction, and whether or not we want to admit it or not, that's what they're going to use for their evaluation when you go to buy a concrete pump. You know, they're going to take these numbers, and so it's going to be much more difficult to get into this business. You're going to have some cash, you're going to have some staying power, you're going to have some reserve, and so I think that's going to itself is going to hammer the industry into a little different situation, to where it's going to be more and more people that understand business and people that invest in this business because it is a good business. Okay.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense. Anything else you'd like to add, or any thoughts for the younger guys getting into the industry?
Well, you know, I take my hat off to all of them, because I've been there and I know how hard they're going to work, and I know how hard this business is. Everybody thinks this is a really glamorous business. It's not. It's a really tough business. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of heartaches. And it's a pressure-packed business, because you're dealing with a perishable commodity. I mean, concrete only has a lifetime of an hour and a half or 2 hours max, and if you're involved in the hydration of that concrete, and you can't get it through your machine, you're going to have some problems. So the pressure's there all the time, and if you're late getting to a job, the pressure's there. I mean, so it's a very pressure-packed business, and you know, and people I think look at all the guys in the country that have made good money pumping concrete, and there's a lot of them. And you know, I mean, we know who they all are. They're all on the board of directors of the ACPA, and they're all very successful people. And they all started out, you know, very similar. You know, they all started off with a small company that grew, and they worked hard. And those days are, I'm not saying they're gone. It's still going to happen. It's, you know, there's going to be guys that come out that are willing to work hard, and they'll make it. But I mean, it's not going to be as prevalent as it used to be. And I think people are going to start looking at this as a business. They'll be comparing the dollars they can put in our equipment and the return they're going to get, as opposed to putting their dollars in different equipment and the return they're going to get. And until we can show that this equipment is in the ballpark with everything else as far as return is concerned, it's going to be more and more difficult to get people into this industry.
Right. I agree. Hey, well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking with you, and
okay.
I look forward to having this up on the website, and I really do appreciate your time.
Well, I wish it was a little more upbeat and humorous, but I mean, right now, I think the message has to be, you know, we all got to get our perspectives in place, and we all got to start working towards those objectives we talked about, and then maybe the next time I talk to you in an interview, we can have a little more fun. Okay?
That sounds great.
All right, thanks, Ted.
Thank you, Ed. All right, bye.